The following audio recording has been designed for learning purposes only. Do not share, distribute, or provide any type of copies, or this audio lesson will not be made available to you. Good luck with today's lesson.
So we got this guy here. Let's go back. Let's download the source code. Let's open this guy up. So to be clear, right? So homework 3A, I want you to modify the guess the number game so that you can make it harder or easier. Does that make sense? And there's a couple of spots in that game that you can do things like that, right? Sort of on the immediate side, but it would be nice to be able to control that, right? Does that make sense to everybody? You can ask the user to do, what kind of a game do they want to play, all right? So here we are, right? When we last left, right, we were looking at this guy and talking about logic operators, right? Ands and ors, things of that nature, right? Does that bring back everybody's memory? All right, so let's go back to that, and then let's start working on your sort of standard procedure, okay? So what do I mean by that, right? So you get an assignment, right? Whether it's from me or some other teacher, you're at work, whatever, okay? They say, I want you to look at this code and I want you to update it to do the following things, okay? All right. So the first thing, typically, like in this case, you've got code that you're already working with or looking at, right? The first thing I would do is comment the whole thing out, number one. And then maybe a few lines at a time, turn it on and understand what's happening. Does that make sense? You don't want to have to debug, a larger number of lines of code or try and understand this thing in entirety. Right? It's a pretty hard job to do that, especially when you think about it. In some cases, you've got hundreds, thousands of lines of code. Right? So you want to step back and really understand what's going on. Does that make sense? So I'm going to turn on, for example, this block of code. All right? So that's now active again. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to start doctoring up this code. Okay. We're going to start doctoring up this code, right? To A, understand it, and then B, to start making changes to it. Okay? So, first thing I want you to do is add a comment block into the code. You guys know what comment blocks look like at this point, right? We've done them a few times. So go ahead and do that, right? Add the comment block to the code. I'm just going to do this. Under the assumption you know what is going to go into that comment block at the top. Right? Does that make sense to everybody? So go ahead and do that. Put the right elements in there. Everybody with me here? Anybody not seen this? Oh, our friend back here. All right. We kind of caught up to that comment block thing. Everybody at that point? All right. So here's the sort of the conversation we had when we left off last time. Right? I would like to be able to do something with the responses that are supplied by the user. Okay, does that make sense? So right now when you run this code, right, in its original form, does it do anything with the response from the user?
No.
Nothing, right? It's just, it's sort of like I should just print, I'm done, right? But if you want to do something that's interactive, which is what you're going to want to do, right? Which, by the way, next week we're going to start project 3 or project 1, and it's a text-based game, so that then says what? A lot of interaction with the user, right? So, like I said, this is sort of a, again, sort of something that will help you as you go ahead and start working on this project, right? So, I want to do something with the responses from the user. You know, say, great answer, or no, dummy, that's not the right answer. Does that make sense? We want to do something. We want to start responding and working with the user, okay? So here's what, 3-4 lines of code. I want you to take that little set of code there, and I want you to modify it so that it does that. It takes what the user gives, it interrogates it for, is it correct, isn't it correct, or something like this, right? Let's get this sort of conversational piece going. Everybody with me here? Yes, sir. Okay. You don't have to question. Yeah, it's not mine. That's all. Here. Let me- Book website. Games, read online for free. Here's all the source code. So this is your first class. What class did you come from? Like that. Registered, right? Yeah. So you've got a lot of catching up to do with that, like a lot.
That's not good.
Yeah, that's fine. So here's the code. So we download this code. Here's our source code. Okay. All right. So I want you to go in and play around with this code. Make some changes to those very first few lines of code, just to sort of test out your concept. Does that make sense to everybody? Interrogate the response from the user. Is it right? Is it wrong? And if so, what do you want to tell the user? Right? Okay. Everybody good with that? So go ahead and take care of that. And then we're going to come back around and see what's happening. we doing? Stop right here. Let's just stop right here. Make the changes. Try it out. Is it doing what you're expecting? If yes, great. If no, why not? Or at least have a hypothesis as to why not. Everybody got something that's somewhat operational? Yes? Hmm? I did. Okay, good. It's all right. Right, your life is going to consist of writing some code, breaking some code, fixing it, writing, fixing it, writing, fixing it, etc., etc. Right? I'll give you another couple minutes. Oh, we're going to have somebody come up to the head of the class and let's see what you did. Come on. come back. Come back. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. So everybody's got something that's somewhat operational? Yes? Alright, so who wants to volunteer to come up to the front? Show us what you did. Right? And this is not a we're picking on you or anything like that, right? Because we can all do it. So anybody want to step forward? Okay, come on. Go ahead. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to copy this block, put it right here, and then comment this out. Put your changes into that second copy of that. Okay?
So, just start with my name up here.
You can, but right now that's not what's important.
All right.
I would just leave it like this. Everybody's got their own version of this thing. Hang on, I gotta take this off. My car is in the shop. Go ahead, you start working on your code. Hello. Yes.
All right. The way I started it out was I changed the input so that answer 1 equals it, so that it would be like you're answering the question to a joke, but if we want to check if it's right or wrong, we add an if statement. Now it's looking for this very specific answer here, and if it gets it right, then it will say that you got it with a statement of very good. Now with this if statement, there also needs to be an else statement for if they get it wrong.
So, sorry about that. My car's in the shop and I need my car.
I understand.
All right, so keep going. Just go ahead and enter it, and then we're going to come back and look at what you did.
So save it right now and run it.
If you're done, that's fine. Go ahead. Okay. Are you all set? Here, let me drive for a while, and I'll make any kind of updates.
I forgot the colon here.
Okay. Go ahead. Okay. Come on. Very nice. Nice. Okay. So again, I mean, this is the kind of thing you're going to be doing as you're working on your homework, right?
Sorry guys if I wasn't that time.
It's okay. It's okay. It's not a big problem. Okay. But right. So take a little bit of the code, make some changes, try it out, make sure it's doing what you think it should do, and then move on. Get to the next piece and the next piece and the next piece. Okay. When we start working on our project, writing the code for that guy, which will be in week 5, right? Well, actually, we'll probably start already next week, part of the whole thing. But the idea is that you won't have some starting code to work with, because guess what? It's your code. Right? So you'll be creating your own stuff. Right? Right now, we're just looking at conditionals. Right? At this particular version, it's looking at single version conditionals. Right? So let's take a look at what he did. So we have a prompt there. Does everybody follow what I'm saying? So this line of code, this is prompting the user to enter something. Okay? At which point, whatever that user enters, what's going on in this line of code? It's a what? It's an assignment statement. We're taking something from the user and assigning it to what? Answer 1. Right? So if this is your program out in memory, right? Here's your program. You've got some variable out here, and it's going to have this guy out there, answer 1, and whatever the user gives will be assigned to that location that's been allocated to that. What can you tell me about the data type of answer 1? It's a string. Why?
Because it's text-based.
No. Exactly. It came from the keyboard. It's been input from the keyboard, right? Anything that comes from the keyboard we know is what? String, right? I don't care if you enter in a numeric like a 1 or 59 or 2000 from the keyboard at this point, it's going to come into the system as a string data type. Everybody with me? All right, so we have this answer 1 value. And then we get to this guy right here. What's happening? What are we doing there? We're interrogating what the user entered, right? It's a conditional, single fire conditional. In other words, you got one shot. It's this, if answer 1, double equal sign, so we're looking for equivalence, is equal to that specifically, right? Lowercase frostbite. Nothing more than nothing less, correct? What happens if you enter in capital F right there?
It'll go with those there.
I'm sorry?
I want to take that one.
Well, if you enter in, up here, capital F frostbite, and we get to this line of code, is it equivalent or not?
No.
It's not. Remember, Python is case sensitive. So it's going to look at this guy, and what's going to happen here? It's going to fail this, right? Because it's not true, and it'll drop into the else condition here, the default condition. Does that make sense? The way this is written, it has to be specifically this guy right here, right? Otherwise, you're going to get this. Sorry, the answer is capital F frostbite with an exclamation point in there, and also a exclamation point. Does that make sense? So if you were looking at this from a sort of mental model, you drop into this, right? You're at the start here. You drop into the first conditional. Well, hang on. Oh boy, here we go again. I don't have a eraser. We ask the user for a value. Answer 1. That value then drops into diamond. A diamond, if you were to, I'm writing up or just drawing up the flow of the information in this program. Okay. Square boxes are nothing more than steps. Right? A diamond shape is a conditional of some kind. Right? So we're saying if whatever you have stored in there for answer 1 is equal to frostbite, if this is true, what's going to happen? If it's true, it's going to do what?
Gonna drop down.
Well, it's going to say, very good, right? Is that correct? It's going to say very good, the output, right? If it's not, if it's false, what's going to happen? It's going to give you the other response, right? And the other response is, sorry, the answer is, right? Right? What's going to happen after that? So if once we either get this or this, what happens next? It's going to print a blank line, but the code is going to end. Do we agree? You get one shot at this. Okay? So I want to stop for a second. Okay? What if I wanted to have more than one possible answer for this? Go ahead. With an or in it? Yeah. Okay, so that's a possibility. So what I'm saying is I want to be able to have more than one correct answer, right? So he's suggesting putting some additional logic operators in there. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Ors and ands and so forth, right? So why don't you modify your code? Your code doesn't have to be exactly like this. Does that make sense to everybody? We're just kind of doing a little lab experiment here, right? I want to be able to have more than one possible correct answer. Okay. Right? This is chapter 4 material now. More than one possible correct answer. How do we do it? Go ahead and make your changes. Right, we're going to call for somebody else. Yes, ma'am.
Is else just considered a false?
It's default.
Default?
Yes.
What does that mean?
So, in other words, if this is not true, it's going to come here.
Okay.
It's the default response.
Oh, I see.
If this were not here and this were not true, what would happen? It would just drop right out of that, right? So this is set up to have a default response. So no matter what happens, no matter what the user enters, they're going to get something, right? Is that what that says? So go ahead and mod your code now to have more than one possible true answer. Or depending on how you wrote it, it could be a false answer. I don't know how you wrote the code. Yes, sir. Okay, so make that last change. That's okay. You can put the or statement in, and I'll explain why it's doing what it's doing. I think I got it. I'll give you a couple more minutes here.
I have a problem with the or statement.
Okay.
So every time that I throw it in, it just wrecks the code and makes it so that any answer I put in becomes the correct answer.
Mm-hmm.
Any answer.
Okay. Are you putting it in properly with strings in there and spaces? Are you duplicating this exact thing? So answer 1 equals some other string, or answer 1 equals some other string, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Try that. Got it down?
Yeah.
Okay. Great minds. Great minds. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Did that help?
Yeah.
other twist into this.
Yeah.
It's all right.
I think I'm forgetting something.
You are.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. So let's take this one from the top before we tackle the next part of this, right? So I'm going to comment this out. Right? And then I'm just going to do this part right here. So all right. So, couple things. I said I wanted to be able to have multiple possible correct answers. Does this look like that would solve that?
It's got two.
Right, it's more than one, right? I didn't say how many, but just multiple. Right? You could make this have 5 more. Right? Here's the question: do we need to have this in front of this every time?
No. Because doesn't input automatically come in as a string?
Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Since everything comes in as a string, we don't really need to try and force it into being a string again. We're not really doing anything here, right? So we could probably eliminate these guys. Let's see. Okay. Right? Look good? Let's try it. The cure-all and end-all is always trying it out. So it's either lowercase frostbite. Oh, can't do a break either in this particular case. All right, so I'm gonna run it again. Okay, so I'm going to put in F, and we should see sorry, try again, which we do, right? And I'll run it again. And we'll put in lowercase frostbite. Oh, sorry, wrong spot. Wrong side. Okay, we are making progress. Do you agree? Right? Let me try one more thing here. Okay? Let's try doing this. This might be a little controversial. Let's try that. Hmm?
Essentially what I do, I don't know, put in if answer one.
Right? Does that make sense what I have going there? So answer one can be this one, or this one, or this one, or this one, or 50 of them if you'd like. Yes, sir.
Can you try and run this code and put in a wrong answer?
Yes? Ready?
I've been doing to make sure that it doesn't just do the correct response all the time.
Ooh, we have a problem. What's wrong?
It automatically makes any answer the correct answer.
We have a problem. Why is it a problem? What is it about an or statement versus an and statement? Sure.
Makes it.
Go ahead.
With the or statement, unless you specifically say the different inputs,
Yeah.
it'll automatically assume that whatever you enter is within the correct responses.
Correct. Right? It's going to check for criteria. Right? Criteria being if either one of these or anything is entered in at this point, the minute you have the flat or like that, right? It's going to say it's true and what else? Display that line. It's going to evaluate the true. In this particular case, you're going to have answer 1 equals frostbite. Right? Sorry. Let's try it. So frostbite 1. Did it wrong. Let's clear this. Run it again. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? You kind of have to be really specific on this. All right? Questions on that? Sorry. And if you run it and put something else in, anything but those two, it gives you that error. All right? Seriously, questions? Are we good here? Yes, ma'am.
So are you trying to get it to give you another input to try again?
The requirements that I said was I wanted you to take that original code block, right, and modify it so that if more than one value would be true. Okay? And you could keep expanding this out if you needed to. Right? And there are more than this way to do this. Does that make sense to everybody? But we're just sort of getting everybody's, everybody on the same sheet of paper to start thinking about, okay, here's what I need to do. How can I do it? Okay? Questions? Yes, sir.
So I had that one string about before.
I'm sorry.
I had that one string.
Yes.
Text about before.
Uh-huh.
Say you're going to explain it for.
What's wrong with this? Well, it's basically what I just said.
Oh, okay.
You have to call out the specifics for each one of the options, okay? Because of how it does the comparison. And we did it like you have it in your code. We said answer 1 is equal to frostbite or uppercase frostbite or like you have it. And it will, anything you put in, it'll equate to true.
Okay.
All right? That's why. It has to have the two pieces to validate it. Yes, sir.
So if I wanted to put like a second if being like, let's say I don't know, and I wanted to give it a second response, can I put that before else?
Yes.
I tried doing that, and it just comes up with the else.
Well, so it's not just if now.
Okay.
It's called elif.
L.
Elif. So he's asking, can I do this? I want to have multiple possibles solutions. Let's say I have ants 1 equals frostbite, or right, answer 1 equals Frank. Right? I can say print got Frank. Right? Doesn't matter. I'm now capable of doing multiple possibles as well. It's just another way of doing it. What this allows me to do is have different output statements based on the input. Does that make sense? Questions about that?
If you want to do, like, let's say 5 of them, do you have to change the LF to a different thing, or like LF1 or anything like that?
What do you mean?
So let's say you want to do Frank, and then you want to do one for Steve and one for Todd and all that.
Yep.
But you wanted different responses for each one.
Right.
Could you just write LF answer 1 equals Todd,
Yes.
and then give a response?
Yep.
Okay.
It's always elif, 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 elif. So if, elif, 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 and then you also have to have the default case else.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Which is what we kind of have here, correct? We have that default case. We still have a problem, though. And he's started to allude to that other option. What if you want to give the guy a couple of chances at guessing? Right? Because the way this is written, you get one shot.
Yeah.
You give one response and it either meets criteria on one of those, that block. Right? Does everybody agree? So, like he said, I want to give him more than one shot. Right? So, if that's the case, the simplest way to do that, right? And I'm just going to take these lines here. Drop that in. Now I have to indent again. Okay. And I'm going to do this. Actually, this needs to come out of here and get dropped into here. Okay. And we won't need this guy. All right, so he's already commented on. Okay. So what's happening now? So we have our initial prompt. I set an extra variable called loop. And what's my limit on chances? 10. I think that's a lot to try. I think we're being very generous to our person in the audience, given that this is sort of like a stand-up comedian, right? Usually you get one shot. If you're lucky, maybe 2, and then after that he'll just ridicule you to pieces. But, so loop is less than 10, and we get a value. Give me something. Okay. 3. I'm sorry.
Give you a value, right?
Yeah. Give me something to set in there for answer 1. Right. Something to check for answer 1, and then we're going to go through our sort of list of possible correct answers. If it's none of them, right? I'm missing something here. I got it. Sorry. One small change. Got to bring this guy into the loop. And we're gonna do a couple of things here with this, right? So we get our response from the user, check it out. If it doesn't meet criteria here, it's not true here. It's going to say, sorry, try again. It's going to increment our little counter for loop. And then it's going to come back up here to the top. Right? What's the value of loop when we come back? 1. Does that while loop still true on evaluation? Is 1 less than 10? And it's going to drop back in and get another answer. Another response from the user. Run the test again. Boom, boom, boom. Right? Is everybody with me here? It will continue to do that, right, until it gets what?
Good job.
Well, okay, till 10, or what else?
You get a correct answer.
What answer? What's that? There's only one up here that will stop you from executing that 10 times.
Frank?
Frank is the only one that will, if you give the answer Frank, in this particular case, as being true, it will break out of the loop that it's in. It'll break out of that logic. Does that make sense? And a break only works with some sort of a loop. Again, loops are conditionals. They only execute when the expression is evaluated to either true or false. Does that make sense? And then if it's true, then you drop in. If it's false, you don't even execute any of this stuff. If it's 11, what's going to happen? It'll bypass the entire block. Because all of this, like in the game, I guess the number game, right? This is all indented underneath the control of that guy. Is everybody with me here? So if we were to look at the graph of it now, we would have something slightly different. The graph now, right, would say, let's check the value. And if it's true, if it meets criteria, you're going to do this. If it's false, what's going to happen? We're going to branch right out of this guy. We won't do anything. If the value of loop is 11, it will jump right out. Does everybody see that? Yes? It'll jump right out. Okay? And otherwise, it will continue to do what it does until it gets Frank. At which point, if you get Frank, and you're under the number of opportunities in loop, under 10, it will break and jump right out of the whole thing. Okay? Questions? Yes, sir?
Forgive me, I know you.
It's not a matter of forgive me. Every question is important. So,
I know you mentioned what the LIF did, but it was.
LIF?
Yeah.
LIF is an else if. It's another test, another level of test. Right? So, and you'll notice, right, this is true, prints that. So this guy here only happens if you give the answer of what? Frostbite. So we actually, the logic there, if what we're trying to do, right, if what we're trying to do is to do the test, right, you don't want to have to do the test too many times. But let's try it out. I mean, you have to understand this, okay? So we come in, and if we give either frostbite or capital F frostbite with an exclamation point, we will get very good, and we will go back to the bottom of the loop. Is everybody with me? And if that's truly the case, then loop is going to increment like that. It's not dependent for the else case. But let's try it out. Okay, run. Oh, we have a syntax here. Thank you very much. What's wrong? Got to have that colon. Let's try it now. Okay, I'm going to put in there Frank. What do we expect to happen? Is the first if statement going to be true?
No.
Is this elif going to be true?
Yes.
So it should do what?
Break and break.
Should break and get out. Is everybody with me? Let's see. Sorry, try again. Sorry, try again. Huh. Why did it do that?
You got a capital.
Because
Oh, it's a
case
capital
sensitive.
F. It's a
Case sensitive.
capital F. See? I tried to outsmart it. So let's break out of this and run. I'm going to put Frank, and we should see what? Should
Got
just
Frank.
jump out of it, right? Got Frank, and we're out. Does that make sense to everybody? Let's run it again. Let's try to run it again. And I'm going to put in here frostbite like that. And it should say very good, right? Because it should. And then what happens?
That's the end of the code.
No. It says very good. Is it doing this test here?
No.
No.
Is it doing this test here?
No.
What's it doing?
Okay.
It says loop equals loop plus 1, and where is it at now? Because it seems to be doing what?
Waiting.
Waiting for a response. Waiting for a response. So if I type in Mary, I'm going to just type in M. Sorry, try again. G. Sorry, try again. R. George. Mary. John. What number are we at right now on loop? Do we know?
7.
We're going to find out in a minute. Let's try Dave, John, Hank. How many did we hit?
10.
We went to the 10. We maxed it out and bounced out, right? We never gave the proper answer. So, questions on the whole loop concept. There's more than one kind of loop, by the way. There's a for loop and a while loop. But we saw the for loop when we worked on what? And the guess the number game, correct? Guess the number game had a for loop in it. Right? Yes? Awesome. Okay? So, my friends, I think 10 is a little high. Right? Maybe 1, 2, 3, perhaps.
I did 5.
But let's, what's that?
I have mine to
Okay.
5.
So one of the things we noticed, and I asked the question, where are we at in the code? Right? Where are we at in the code? What's the value of loop? So there's a couple things we can do. We can, what I like to call, instrument the code. Right? We can go into the code and say, all right, I want to know where I'm at when my code is executing, right? So I'm going to put, just temporarily, some print statements. Let's say print in the loop. Okay. Oh, and by the way, I also want to know, right? What would I want to know?
Which loop you're in?
What?
many times is that?
How many? What's the value of loop? Right? So I want to know loop. That's fine. Plus str loop. What's that going to do for me?
It's going to tell you each number you're in.
It's going to concatenate the translated value of loop, because what is the data type of loop right now?
Sure.
Integer.
Oh.
It's an integer. So if I want to see that, I have to concatenate this stuff together, correct? Is everybody with me? Awesome. So let's try it. Ready? Okay, what do you get? So I'm in the loop, and my value for loop is 0. Okay, so now I'm going to say George. Sorry, try again. Loop is 1. Mary, 2. Dave, 3. And you can see where this is going, correct? Yes? Questions? Questions? How we doing? Questions? Anybody? No questions? Yes.
Is there a way to count down instead of up?
Sure. Start at 10 and subtract. Right? So, sorry. Right? She wants to try and count down. So, set loop to 10 while it's not equal to, say, 5. While it's equal to, loop is greater than equal to 5. Right? And then just say loop minus. Right? How many times will loop execute now? I don't know. Yeah, possibly 6. If we do this, it won't. So loop is 10. 9. Right? How's that? So what I want you to do, I want you to take a look at the next joke. Okay? Look at the next joke, or riddle. And I want you to try and incorporate this thought into the next one. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out for the moment, because we don't need that guy. And we're going to go on to this guy here. Well, I want you to do the same sort of thing, right? You should be able to sort of mimic what's there pretty quickly, right? Yes? So try doing the next one. scenario, you're gonna have to drop that line in back on or D in here. No, else is the default, right? So you have to say on the third shot or whatever, right, PPV, and then print the actual color. Right? Does that make sense to you? Well, instead of, you could put it actually right underneath tries. You don't need the else. Just delete that guy. Now delete it. Now execute that. Let's see. Let's see. You could always check the value of the loop. See what happens. How we doing, guys? Got it going? No? Yes? Kind of?
Confused.
Good. That's a good place to be.
So every time I do it, it just says this is not in the.
Guys doing all right?
I think I got it.
Okay.
Which exactly what we have here. For some reason, these were against the L, but it said break it out of the loop, so every time I did it,
You might want to do something. Check to see the loop value.
Where's the beginning
Where
of
you
the loop?
display that.
Shouldn't it be the if statement, or do you actually have to write?
Well, it's the answer.
So,
Back up.
so here's what I had originally.
Okay.
So when I did that, I'm gonna go break is outside the loop. So it should be good.
Okay.
Well, there's no real loop going on. You just have two conditions.
So how do I,
So a loop is going to begin
what did it say?
with, it's going to be
Oh, for.
for a while, right? So if you're going to do a for loop that does something within a range, well, it doesn't work that well with this. So I just do this. Right? Run equal to
That's
zero.
right.
So now the Python knows that loop one equals
Right.
zero. So that like, so well, loop one. Something wrong. So while loop one is less than 10, or less than 3. Oh, colon.
They're just put, let's say they want to do any of that stuff already, want to do the specific, whatever that, could I just put while I
That's
put
the standard option.
whatever, too, but I didn't want to put how many loops.
Then it'll just run forever.
Well, I was just saying, but if I were to do that.
Yeah,
wouldn't
if you
it-
were,
wouldn't-
you could
wouldn't it
try.
break them, if I give you these two answers? Because it'd be.
Well, it's not done yet.
Yeah.
So you need a couple other things. Like,
So if I try to remember. So let's say, hey, we're looking at truck, okay? Well, so for even any answer, it should break and say tackle.
All right.
yeah, because it's not done. You got a whole lot of other things to add and bring us up.
Couple more minutes. Couple more minutes, guys.
Okay, so loop equals 0, right? Well, loop is less than 3. So,
Ready to do that?
answer 1 equal 0. If answer 1 equals black hole,
Wait for the next one. Okay. Why don't you come up,
you got
Read your code.
this. So
and let's see what you get going on.
and then it restarts. And then else right here. Because this is the else statement.
Right, wrong,
It's
or
not the right answer.
whatever it is, bring it on up.
You're gonna have to do another input. So,
I think I got it.
Okay, hold that.
because it should just go back to the
Hold that. He's gonna bring up his latest code, and we're gonna take a look at it.
Oh no, why do you have a black hole under the else statement?
Well, what I wanted to do is just for the beginning, just be like, you get one guess if you're wrong, it's just.
You just want one guess?
Well, that's what I was gonna get the first time, just Yeah, couldn't do that. But if we're gonna say no trade,
Watch this guy.
I was just
Let's try. Where did that go?
It's not that.
Just minimize everything.
Got the stick.
Nope, it's not
Is
there.
that it?
This is the one
Okay.
that I was.
So this is the second problem, or second riddle. Right? Answer 2, 0, less than 4. So go ahead, comment out the top one.
Comment to the top one.
Not that. No, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, comment out that guy. Let's focus on this one.
Let's see. Comment at region.
Okay. Ready? Here we go.
Did you write all of that, or did you paste it?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Did you write all of that? I wasn't paying attention. Did you write all of that?
No, he pasted it from a stick.
Yeah.
Oh, he used to say, okay.
All right, so start testing over there. Okay, so far so good. Let's run it again. Let's go back to the code. Right, so what do dentists call an astronaut's cavity? Get a value set to 0 as long as it's less than 4, less than or equal to. So you got 5 options or 5 chances. It's equal to this, or that. Okay. And if you get it correct, one of them. Oh, hold on, I'm getting busy here. So,
Sorry.
Good job. You're right. Great. Okay, so we're busting out of the loop if you get it correct. And if loop is less than 4, nope, try again. Answer 2, get some value again. Increment the loop counter and jump back in. Is it correct? Right? Is everybody with me here? So it seems to be okay. And if you don't put anything in, so run it again and let's just put in, like, hit the enter key. Oh, try again. Again. Enter key. Okay, very cool. Keep going. See if we can exceed the counter. All right, very good. Nice round of applause. Just kidding. I feel like we're getting the magician up here and we're going to pull the rabbit out of the hat, right? Okay, questions on what we have going on here so far? Is everybody with what's happening? Yes? Take your own code. Here's what I'd like you to do. Take your own code. Now, wherever you're at, you should have something that's executable for the first 2 jokes or riddles. And do the last one. And the last one is not the same style as the first 2. Right? The last one is a what kind of joke? It's a knock-knock joke. So that's going to throw a few twists into your code. Right? So you're going to have to think your way through how are you going to navigate that so that the cadence, right? That's what they call joke stuff like this, so that it walks along nice and smoothly each time. Okay? So you're going to have to make some changes. And that, my friends, is homework 3B. Okay? Thanks. Questions on that? So you got 3A, 3B. So finish where you left off here for the knock-knock joke part. Okay? Not a lot of work, not a lot of typing, but what is it going to take? A lot of thinking. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Do you want the third one to be on the same sheet as the first 2, or you want?
Yeah, no, I want it as part of the whole deal. Okay? So let me put, as you're sort of writing this down and thinking through it, there's a couple of things here that would be sort of an improvement to this too. Right? That is to, right now you've got, this guy up here has 10 chances, this guy's got 5 chances, right? We haven't even started to talk about the knock-knock joke. All right? There is a way to set the number of possibilities overall for all the jokes, the number of options, okay? So I want you to think about that too. Does that make sense to everybody? I mean, right now you've got 10 chances for this one, 5 chances for that one, 3, whatever. It would be nice to have sort of a uniform number of opportunities for each one of the, I don't know what you call them, riddles, jokes, whatever. Okay? But at minimum, get the knock-knock joke to work appropriately, right? So that it flows like it should on a knock-knock joke. Okay? We're not doing it here, guys. This is homework 3B. Do it at home. Just like 3A, 3B, because we're going to jump back into the material here. All right? I know everybody's like madly trying to get this done quick.
I'm just having fun.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying yourself. I'll ask you that same question in 2 weeks.
Well, seeing as I'm having fun, but I also have a headache, most likely I'll be comatose.
Nice. All right, so let's go now back to chapter 4 in the text, and let's double check that we got everything going, right? The whole idea, escape characters, right? We actually went a little beyond with what's in chapter 4, okay? So we're done 1 through 4, my friends. Everybody with me here? We're going to jump into chapter 5. We're going to just start it so that when you have some free time next week, like Monday or over the weekend, right, get your homework done. But in the meantime, we're going to start looking at the topics. Some of these topics we've already sort of covered, like loops, okay? And they talk about a while statement, ands and ors, and we haven't talked about not yet, but we will. A return from the keyboard, and so forth, right? So if you were to graph this next game, or this next set of code, it would look like this, right? So it starts at the top, show the introduction, player chooses a cave, check for friendly or hungry dragon, player wins, player loses, asked to play again, end. Okay? This is the flow of information in this next set of code. Does that make sense? And it looks kind of similar in style to this guy here. This is called the flow chart, and we will talk about flow charts and work on using flow charts starting next week as we begin to sort of put together your project. All right? So let's go out and grab this, and there's a number of things in here. Okay, so I'm going to go back out to, hang on, I saw it. The source, and it's called Dragon. And we are now starting to head into a whole new territory, my friends. This is the Dragon program. So what do you see up there, right off the bat, that looks different than what we had before?
It's one of those text-based adventure games.
Nice idea. I'm not really concerned about what kind of adventure game it is. I'm concerned about the structure of the code in here. What do you see?
The blocks are pretty straight.
The blocks? Somebody gave the magic word. Functions. Functions. Right? That would be anything that starts with a DEF. DEF, DEF, DEF. These are functions. What do you notice about them? The words after it is blue, okay. You'll notice that there's this indentation here. Right? Does that make sense? Same here, okay. Actually, this one's quite long. Right? We're going to add one to this when we sort of come back around to this next time. Right? But you'll notice, like, we've got some imports at the top. We have a DEF display intro. So what the heck? What is this whole idea of a function? What does that mean? Right? So here's a way of thinking about it. Okay? I'm sure you've all you're all sort of old enough to remember this, and you may have one of these, but do you remember a calculator? And you would press like the square root function. That means it would take whatever in the display when you press the square root function, and it would literally apply the square root function, right? And give you back some sort of a response. This works exactly the same. Right? We're calling a function that was handcrafted. Right? You're going to be creating functions in your project 1. Okay? So that that means that when I execute this line of code here, display uppercase I intro with the parentheses, what's going to happen?
It's gonna print those lines.
It's going to execute this block of code, because this is the definition. Right? It's the same idea like a square root function. It takes what's in the display, you press the square root key, it executes the square root function, and returns a response. In this particular case, we're calling the display intro function. This guy right here. All of this is what's implemented or executed when you call display intro. Does that make sense? So I'm calling display intro, and it's going to pop up some text. Right? Again, we're going to call another function called chooseCave, which is this guy. And this guy is a little bit different than this function. Take a good look at that chooseCave function. What do you see in there? What looks different? Something new.
I see strings without a value.
Strings without a value. Oh, you mean cave equals?
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine, we'll talk about that. It's got a loop in there, right? But what's after the loop? A what? A return statement. A return statement. Very interesting. Return statement. What do you think happens here when you call chooseCave? It's going to execute this line of this block of code, and based upon what the user supplies, that value will be returned at the end of the function. Okay? So in this particular case, it's going to be a 1 or a 2. Okay? And it's going to come down here. Notice the way this is written. Cave number equals chooseCave. So what do you think is going to happen to that return statement?
Does it get overridden?
No. Go ahead.
The return statement value will be assigned to cave number.
Ah! Somebody remembered that this is what kind of a statement? It's an assignment statement. So when you call this guy, this, whatever this value is for cave, will replace this. And that value will in turn be what? Assigned to cave number. Silence. Right? Then we're going to execute the next line, and what is going on in this guy? And again, we're coming at this from like the 20,000-foot level here, folks.
It's calling the function check
Cave with what?
with the cave number.
With
So-
the value that we set after we ran that chooseCave, right? So we're going to send that value in here. So when we call this guy, what is it going to be known as in there? Chosen cave. So inside of here, the value of chosen cave is this value over here. There's a little bit of hocus pocus going on here. Right? But we're sending this number, whatever the user supplied, a 1 or a 2, into here, and then it's going to use that value to make some decisions. We see something else over here that we've seen already, right? This line here. What's happening here? Go ahead.
It's the assignment statement is going to the random library and giving a random integer for which one will be the good cave event.
Well, we're sort of, but all it's saying is, I'm either going to return a 1 or a 2 out of here, right? And there's some probability of that value. Does that make sense to everybody? It's going to assign that to friendly cave, and then we're going to come here, and we're going to run this. Right? And it has to take and convert friendly cave, because what kind of data type is friendly cave?
Integer.
Integer. What's an integer? Random ran in. It's going to pick one or the other integer and assign it to friendly cave. Chosen cave, on the other hand, because it what? Came in from the keyboard, is a string. So in order to do this comparison, you have to change this from an integer to a string. Okay? Go ahead and run the game. Yes, sir.
Could you also take the other value and turn it into an integer?
You could have done that, sure. You can do it one way or the other. I mean, there's multiple ways to do this sort of stuff.
I was wondering so much how you delay text like that, and I'm so happy to learn that now.
Go. We having fun? So there's a lot of sort of at a 20,000 foot level, right? How much would you play this game if you were 10 years old? What's that? Only 3? Really? If you were 10? Come on. You have a short attention span.
That's ADD for me.
I think you would play it quite a few times, right? Waiting to find out, are you going to get the treasure or are you going to get gobbled up? Right? You would play it a number of times, right? But it's cool, right? It doesn't do a whole lot, but just enough to sort of drag you into the game, right? Interesting?
Very.
So let's think about what's happening here. Let's keep sort of looking at this. Right? We're calling display intro. We're calling choose cave. We're calling check cave with cave number. These are 3 examples of 3 different kinds of functions. The first one does nothing but display something, doesn't return anything. The second function does something and it returns a value. That value in turn is assigned to a variable, and then that variable is used as a, what do we call that? Oh, that's right, you guys haven't read chapter 5 yet. It's an argument. This is known as an argument at this point in time, okay, when you call a function. Here, it's known as a parameter in the definition. These are the definitions. This one, and this one. They're the definitions of a function. And oh, by the way, they have to be written, and the function has to be defined prior to usage. Right? You can't have this block of code up here and execute it. It's not going to be very pretty. Okay? Because the interpreter doesn't know what to do when you call the functions if they're not already defined. Does that make sense? We're going to talk much, much more about all of this next week. But as you notice, the code is getting a little more complex. Right? But what this does, the ability to write code like this, starts to promote something called reusability. Write it one time and continue to reuse that. Does that make sense? We're going to talk more about that and the impact of that on the whole sort of field. Okay. Questions?
Where is chosen cave assigned?
Chosen cave. Chosen cave is not assigned. What ends up happening is this value is sent in this position. It's an argument, which in turn in the definition becomes chosen cave. Right? Like I said, there's a little bit of this going on, a little sleight of hand, right? The system doesn't care what you call it as long as there's a value being sent in this position. And oh, by the way, it has to be what kind of a value? Some sort of a string value. No, chosen cave is, yeah, it's a string value, some sort of a numeric, but it's a string. Okay? We will analyze this in much greater detail when we get back together again Tuesday, right? We only got Monday now. So, all right? Questions, comments? So you have your homework assignments for the week? Yes?
For the intro, for the string,
Uh-huh.
you have a pre-opening code.
Yes, that's a triple quoted string. We'll talk about what those are. Yes?
For the at the bottom, where you assign the return value of choose cave to cave number, and you put cave number into the next one as the parameter, could you substitute the variable that you use as a parameter for the
This guy?
Could you put choose cave as a parameter, like function call as a parameter?
This?
Yeah.
No.
No?
It's a function. It's not an argument. If you want to call it as part of another function, you actually have to physically write that line into the function definition. Call choosecave. Here's something you have to keep in mind a little bit, right? You always, when you're starting to use functions, you have to remember what they require and what they will return or not return to you. Does that make sense? So here it doesn't take anything. Here it doesn't take anything, but it returns a value. Any function that returns a value is part of an assignment statement. Okay? Just automatic. And this one, you're calling the function with the argument, okay? But it doesn't return anything. This guy doesn't return anything. It could, but the way that's written, it doesn't. Okay? Again, just some food for thought. I would start looking at chapter 5. Okay? As part of your adventure for the weekend. So two assignments, not too big, but they will force you to think and test and think and test. Remember, you're trying to get the mechanic for the knock-knock joke to be correct. Okay. So. Questions about anything?
Random number.
And the guess the number game, correct. So there's a 3A and a 3B assignment.
So, the number game, does that mean
A, 3A. Okay? I'll put that into the stuff right now. Okay, 3A is the guess the number mod, and 3B is the jokes mod. Okay? Questions? All right. If you have questions, stick around. If you don't, have a nice weekend. We'll see you on Tuesday.
Good luck with today's lesson.